When we're reading scripture, and for that matter whether we're reading Shakespeare or Tolstoy or anyone else worthy of our respect, the aim should never be to skip over what at first glance seems less exciting and jump to the juicy bits. With scripture there is always the danger of saying, well, never mind the detail, we know that what Paul was really trying to say was this or that or the other. Paul is in a hurry in Galatians, and in any case like Shakespeare, he does nothing by accident. If he has decided that this passage from what we call 1:18 to what we call 2:10 is the necessary preliminary to what he wants to say thereafter, it makes sense to try to follow his train of thought rather than assuming that ours is better. After all, the aim of exegesis ought always to be to arrive at the point where we say, if we stand here and see the matter through Paul's eyes instead of our own, we will realize that he's said exactly what he meant. After all, it's easy for us to take a purple passage like the last 7 verses of chapter 2, the death of Jesus and freedom from the law and justification by faith, to take that out of context and to put them into a very different context, namely the debates about grace and works and faith and law as they were set up in the 16th century and hammered out thereafter. Those debates are important. They're part of our shared Christian story. But if we are to be faithful to Scripture, which is what the Reformers insisted we should do, we must constantly turn things around. The great Reformers, Luther and Calvin, Tyndale and Cranmer, they were doing their best to give biblical answers to the questions of their day. But again and again, that pushed them to assume that the biblical writers were actually addressing those same questions and to ignore the questions they were really asking. Our task, in faithfulness to the God who gave us Scripture, is to do our best to find out what those first century questions were and what answers the first century writers were giving to them, and to allow that historical investigation to challenge and reshape the way we approach things today. I've often said that our task is to stop giving 19th century answers to 16th century questions and to try to give 21st century answers to first century questions.